Oh my God, is it Thursday again? Welcome to the Chicken Box. We're here. That's right, ready to speak the truth. Black people, we are versus everything. Today, we are versus the vote. That's right, we are definitely versus the vote. If you just tuned in and this is your very first time, this is the Chicken Box broadcast from the Afro American Newspaper's Facebook page where we speak the truth to stereotypes, we dispel myths, and we really dive into the Black community and find out what makes us different. All of us aren't alike. All of us aren't going to always be alike. And we have different generations that are represented. I'm Kevin Impeccable Peck. I represent the Gen X crew. As soon as I said X, I want to say Xbox or something. I don't know why I went there. Anyway,
I feel like it was like a powerful pause. That's
right. It was like a stamp, like when you see that X just stamped there, like somewhere in history, it always just stands out. And Micha Green, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you very much. How are you?
I am getting through this whole thing. It's the countdown to the vote. I'm really excited about just the invigorating everybody to get out there and get in that booth. Exactly. Don't mail it in. Anyway, I'll save that for later. But anyway, the Chicken Box, some people say, what is that name? Where does it come from? It is a name that was originated in Baltimore, I think. But they made it famous when it comes to food. 4 wings and fries. That was the Chicken Box. But here on the Afro, the Chicken Box is where we speak our truth. So, man, we missing Dr. Draper today. She had a conflicting engagement. She usually represents the boomers.
The boomers / secret millennials. She thinks
she says she's a nighttime millennial. After I think she becomes a millennial. But today we have a great guest joining us. And Micha, why don't you introduce our guest while we share? If we popped up on your Facebook thread, all I would like you to do is the arrow that points over, hit the share it with your friends, share it with your groups or pages that you manage. Grab your lunch, your breakfast, or your dinner, depending on what part of the world you live on. And let's get into a conversation about Black people versus the vote today. Yes. Please introduce our guest, Micha.
So I am really, really honored to introduce our guest today. First of all, she told us before we went live that she is representing for the boomers today. So we want to, first of all, shout her out for that. But Dr. Elsie Scott is the director of the Ronald Walter Leadership and Policy Center at Howard University, and she's secretary of the board for the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. You guys might know it as NCBCP. And she's also the former president of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and former executive director for the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. Oh my goodness, she has done so much. I have been admiring her. She's been one of my sheroes from afar for many years. And it's so cool that I get to talk to her today. But I told her that I was going to share a little funny story before she was fully seen and introduced.
All right. I'm waiting in suspense now. I'm in suspense
her now, and so that I can see her reaction as I take it there.
Dr. Scott, welcome to the Chicken Box.
And everything. So first of all, welcome to the Chicken Box, Dr. Scott. Dr.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. So here's my creepy story that I told her I would tell her. In terms of,
I'm gonna put her next to you in case she has to smack you on the Chicken Box today. Anyway, go ahead.
Look, I give you full permission to digitally slap me. But so I guess it was probably at this point 5 years ago, we were at Congressional Black Caucus, and I was so excited because I, had admired Dr. Scott from afar, and she had just finished this amazing panel with NCBCP actually, and had killed it. And so I saw she was walking to the bathroom and followed her in the convention center to the bathroom. I did use it since I was in there. You know, you're supposed to
Oh,
do
I
that.
think I remember.
And then I came in, but it was just to tell you how much I loved you and how much I admired you. So I cornered her in the convention center bathroom to fangirl with Dr. Scott. So I'm thankful now that I get to talk to her now as DC editor for the Afro and not just a creepy 25-year-old.
Wow, that is a big difference because there is a man law, at least in the Black community. You cannot talk in the bathroom to men at all. Don't say hello. Don't talk to me while I'm going to the bathroom. It is an official air quote man law to not talk in the bathroom. When you talk,
You don't know about the meetings in the ladies' room.
Right.
We have meetings.
I just found out you that if you can meet somebody or corner them, your favorite person, just wait for them to go to the bathroom in the convention center, and you might get that connect that you're looking for. This is a Chicken Box. You just tuned in. We are on with Micha Green and the illustrious Dr. Scott, which we found out we are more than just associates and guests, that we are family. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta. For any Deltas out there, I know this don't have nothing to do with the vote, but we want you to get to know who's on here. And she also happens to go to one of my cousin's churches, who was her pastor. So now she is now family, okay, here on the Chicken Box. We're going to get into Black people versus the vote. How important is that, y'all? How important is it? Dr. Elsie, just speak from your heart right now on where we are on this countdown and how serious this year's election is.
Well, this year is very serious because nobody knows what to predict and what might be happening with all of the chaos about the U.S. Postal Service and with the president that's saying that you can't trust the Postal Service, with a president that's saying you can't trust mail ballots, with all of the legal assaults on early voting, on absentee ballot, on ex-offenders voting. So it's just a lot of confusion until a lot of people might just say, I don't think I'll vote because it's too much of a problem. And then on top of all of that, you have the pandemic. Because people are afraid to go out and stand in long lines. They're afraid of getting infected. So it's a lot. So therefore we have to be more vigilant this year than ever before.
That's a perfect segue into stereotypes. You said where people are afraid, and Micha, always on the Chicken Box, we want to dispel some stereotypes. So why don't you jump right in there? My millennial friend. I like to say that, my millennial friend.
I really like that. I think that should now, instead of DC editor, it should say Micha Green, millennial friend. So as I always say, let me just give you a disclaimer that indeed these are stereotypes. This is nothing endorsed by the Afro-American newspapers or Afro media, nor are these necessarily the views and beliefs of those on the show. These are solely just stereotypes.
Let me stop you for 1 second. It sounds like we have some echo in the back, and maybe we might have the volume up on the Facebook stream, or we have the stream up on our phones. I just want to make sure that our guests, and our audience can hear us clearly.
Yes, if you guys can give us thumbs up, because I can hear the echo a little bit as well.
Dr. Scott, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Just check and make sure that the stream is not on volume wide on Facebook as well as on the from the broadcast page. If not, let's keep moving forward.
I think it's better.
We've done it.
Yeah.
We've done it, you guys. Hey, listen, we're in a new time, in a new place. We're meeting in new ways, and we're learning. If you remember how you looked in the beginning of the pandemic, when you were in the dark streaming, when you didn't know nothing about streaming, when you couldn't even find your background on Zoom, you looked like you were floating in and out of a background. Anyway, we're going. All right, let's get to the stereotype. We'll deal with streaming, Black people versus streaming in another. That's a great episode. Anyway.
All righty, so let's dig in. The first, and some of you guys, if you tuned in last week, you may have heard some of these as well. But the first is that Black people are solely Democrats. That is what is a stereotype. And we'll talk about facts later. I will say that 88% of African Americans who voted for Hillary in 2016, but only 70% of them considered themselves Democrats at the time. So again, those are just facts underneath the stereotype, to underscore the stereotype. Black Republicans only vote Republican because Lincoln freed the slaves. Again, a stereotype. And we know that about 8% of African Americans actually consider themselves Republican. And then there's a stereotype that Black people don't vote. And that Black people aren't informed. And we are going to get hopefully into that a lot today, because we have someone like Dr. Scott, who has spent much of her career really fostering and supporting the African American community and understanding why it's important to vote, understanding some of the legislation that we have and why we need to fight for more to support our rights. And so I'm really looking forward to talking to Dr. Scott about these stereotypes, because, while I was looking up the stereotypes, some of them had a little bit of fact to support them, such as Black people being Democrats, etc. But in terms of us being uninformed, in terms of us just being lazy, and of course not voting, that's not the case. So I'm ready to hear from an expert on this topic.
Okay, well, before we jump in, we want to say hello to Racine, Byron for tuning in. Jewel says, I love this. I'm going to say Miss Kent. I got to learn how to pronounce your name. You're going to have to phonetically spell it out for me so I can do it. Thank you for being our engineer and saying that the sound is better, Felicia. Mike Green says everything's fine. Bonnie says we're frozen. I don't know if we're frozen, but you guys put any stereotypes in the thread that you may have heard, and we'll share them about voting and Black people. Shaniqua, I got it now. See how that helped? That was how, like, we had to learn how to say Senator Kamala. She spelled it out like COMA and then LA. So Kamala. So that way we don't, because we as Black people will mess that name up. We don't have a lot of friends named Kamala. So that in itself is, so Shaniqua, I got it. Boom. Let's go.
We do need to. We talked about this. Just a quick aside. We did talk about Black people versus names, so we got to put that in the file for later.
All right, we're gonna have to go to generations, because some names, they just fit generations. Like when a name, like, she's gonna get mad, like Dorothy. That's not a millennial name. That just doesn't happen. That is a certain generation that just, Margaret, those names are not out there anymore. But anyway, we're talking about the vote today.
Let's talk about the vote.
All right. Micha, just give us a little bit more history about the Black vote as it relates to modern times.
All right. So first of all, we know that African Americans over centuries have fought for the right to vote. We know that there were great Black suffragists even before some of the ones that we laud to this day, such as Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, who all fought for the right to vote. But if we look at the 20th century, you had people like FDR, who first helped slay African Americans with the New Deal. You had Harry Truman, who desegregated the U.S. military in 1948, and that was major for African Americans. And then with JFK and Johnson, who were very active with the African American civil rights movement, et cetera, as well as voting rights, Black people said, okay, sure, because we're getting that support in the Democratic Party, we will swing our vote that way. So the most votes any Republican candidate received since 1968 was for Gerald Ford in 1976, and that was 15% of the African American vote. And so we talk about how African Americans over the years have been incredibly active in trying to have the right to vote and attain and maintain voting rights as we're doing today. We know that there have been challenges to our voting rights. Specifically, we saw the I guess, full effects of that in 2016 and 2018, particularly in 2018, with the midterm elections in Georgia and Florida. So we're now in this place of having the right to vote, but some of those rights being challenged through redistricting, through, again, creating rules about registered voters that some voters wouldn't even be informed about. But we've had, historically, Black people have had a serious focus on voting. I mean, we can even go to E.B. Du Bois with the NAACP. You can look at SNCC. Of course, you get Mississippi Freedom Summer and King and the Voting Rights Act of 1964. So these were, major things in modern history. So the fact that people are saying Black people don't vote is absurd, because not only do we vote, we've been out there fighting for the right to vote for years. Now, whether or not we're coming out in numbers like we should be, is a conversation that we'll have today.
If you just tuned in, this is the Chicken Box. Dr. Scott, I see you chomping at the bits. We have you on for a reason. Why don't you give just everybody maybe just a 1-minute glimpse into what you're doing now, and then we can get really started on your take on Black people versus the vote.
Okay. Well, it was interesting listening to a millennial give the history of voting. I say, wow, she did her homework.
I was gonna say, please correct me though. Please correct me if I got anything off.
No, you did a good job. I was impressed.
Yay! Thank you, Dr. Scott.
But now, as it relates to voting, I run the Ron Walters Center at Howard. And Ron Walters, for people who don't know, Dr. Ron Walters was a professor at Howard University for 25 years. He was chair of the political science department. But beyond that, he was well known in the journalistic community. He wrote a column for NNPA papers every week. And he was consulted by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other media for his opinion, because he was one of the best thought leaders around Black people in voting. And he wrote a number of books, including a book called White Nationalism, Black Interests, which a lot of people are now pulling off the shelf to try to read it, because what he did, he's predicted a lot of the rise of white nationalism, or the rise again of white nationalism in this country, and the whole Trumpism around playing the race card. He also was a strategist behind Jesse Jackson's run for president in 1984 and 1988. In fact, they said he was the thought leader behind that campaign. And he went to the Democratic Party and studied their rules and came up with why a Black person like Jesse Jackson wouldn't get the nomination was because of the rules. And he got them to change the delegate rules. And now you have many more Black delegates to the Democratic Party. And many people give him credit for making the way for Barack Obama getting the nomination in 2008. So that's the person whose legacy I'm seeking to preserve at Howard University. So we have a whole new generation of students who didn't know Ron Walters, but they are learning him through books, through lectures, and through some of his students who are now professors at Howard. And I'm working with the Howard University Student Association, because this year they are very much engaged in election. And you might want to bring some of them on one week to talk about what they're doing in terms of making certain that Howard students are registered to vote, that they are going to vote, that they are volunteering to be poll watchers. But really, it's a paid position, but still you volunteer to work it. So we're working with them. And then, as I'm on the board, as you know, of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, and we have a group called Unity, where we join with Black organizations, national Black organizations, to help to get out the vote, help people get registered to vote. And this year, it's made more challenging, because we have to get people to decide how they're going to vote, because it used to be on election day, you go and vote. But now most people expect to do an early vote. And so they're going to either early vote by going to an early vote opportunity within their state, or they will do early voting in terms of mailing in their ballot. And then even in terms of mailing ballot, do you send it by the post office? Do you drop it off down at the election center? Do you do it, use a dropout box? So it's a lot this year to digest. So we are very busy this year just trying to help people get educated around what are the options around voting.
Absolutely. Micha, we have a couple questions in the thread. Do you see those? I think you're on mute. This is the Chicken Box. If you just tuned in, where we come on and we talk about speaking our truth. Everybody has a moment of their own truth, whether the truth resonates with you. And a lot of times people get mad when what you say doesn't match what they say. But that is what has caused a lot of violence in history. That's what caused a lot of arguments in households. And that has to change. When somebody doesn't agree with you, that doesn't, you shouldn't just strike an anger chord on the guitar and go into a rage just because, oh, you're a black Republican. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, so all of a sudden you're not a human being anymore. Anyway, Micha, I was getting ready to get on the chicken box. Almost. Anyway, go ahead.
So this is a great question from Mark P, who says, are we voting for African freedom? And my question, Mark, if you can clarify in the comments, are you talking African American freedom, or are you talking about the diaspora? But Dr. Scott, what do you think? Can you weigh in on what we should be voting for this year, or what we are voting for this year?
Well, there are so many reasons to vote, and if we've said that all Black people are not alike. And so there are different reasons and different motivations for voting. For example, when people ask me, why voting is so important to you. My father was a civil rights activist. My father got shot trying to get people the right to vote. So it's very personal for me, but that may not motivate somebody who doesn't know anything about the civil rights movement. That may not motivate them to vote. So I need to try to figure out what captures them. And one thing we do at NCBCP, we have the Black Women's Roundtable. We usually do surveys to find out what issues will drive, especially Black women, to the poll. Are there education issues? Are there economic issues? Are the issues around Social Security? And so you try to look at people and see where they sit in society, and then we decide what will push them to vote. Now, he might be referring to, there's a lot of discussion around reparations now. Ron Walters wrote about reparations too, and when a lot of people in the academic community were not talking about it. Now, some people feel like we are in a position where maybe we'll get reparations now. And so some people are voting to turn the Senate because you've already had a reparations bill passed in the House. So they feel like they're going to vote for that. So you have to decide what's in your interest. And then you find the candidate who supports that, or you join that person's campaign to try to convince them that this should be part of their platform. And so, so many people get confused. Well, I'm not voting for him because he did such and such a thing. You have to recognize that when a person is running for president, and I think Joe Biden has made this point, that he has to be president of the United States. And Obama used to say that. And so everything he does is not going to satisfy you because he represents people, a diversity of people. And so we have to look at that when we're voting as to which candidate represents the most of what I'm interested in. But I know I won't get everything because he is not my individual president. He is the president, or one day, someday, she will be the president of all people.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. We have another question from Felicia DeBrell, who says, what was the name of the book that you recommended? And I just got to shout out this person who has said, my Shiro, Dr. Scott.
Oh,
way more.
One of the Wilmington 10. You ever heard of the Wilmington 10?
Absolutely.
That's who Wayne Moore is.
Wow, you're a hero, Mr. Moore as well. So thank you so much. You are also a hero.
Well, yeah. let for those who don't know, because this show also educates. Please explain the Wilmington 10 to our audience.
Okay, the Wilmington 10, they were some high school students in Wilmington, North Carolina, who wanted to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday as a holiday. And they were kicked out of school and they were arrested around some activities that happened in Wilmington. They were illegally charged, and it took them many years. They went to prison. It took them many years to be vindicated. And then finally, they were found that they were innocent. And Ben Chavis was sent down there by the United Church of Christ to help them. And so that's how Ben Chavis got arrested along with them. But Wayne was one of the high school students who, as a high school student, decided to assert his rights. So we are very proud of him.
Wow. Thank you
Now,
so much.
I forgot his question.
The Wilmington 10. Listen, no, let's all give it up, because everybody needs to, you have to, you have to have some passion about what you're doing and how you're moving. And thank you, Wayne, for tuning in today. Mark P says, that's sad. We are all just Africans. I'm just reading that comment out loud. But that took me to a place. Sometimes things, moments in history will take you to a place where you pause just to realize. And when you said, Dr. Scott, that your father was shot, was he killed?
No, he lived.
He lived. Okay.
You mentioned about was he killed. One of the interesting things is that after he was shot, and when they brought in the FBI and the police out there investigating, and they're looking at the car, because they filled the car full of buckshots, and my father, my mother, and 4 siblings were in the car. And my father was the only one who got hit. And so they had evidently practiced the shooting, and they'd expected to get him in his chest or in the head or whatever. But when they practiced, they didn't recognize that when they pulled up beside his car, the highway was on an incline. And so the bullets went up instead of coming across. And then it was interesting listening, because my mother said the police were really ones who shot him. And they would come out there and they would stand at the car and they would say, and the shot would have gone here. And then one say, I don't see how in the hell. And he said he almost made a mistake and say, we miss you. But he said, I don't see how in the hell they miss you.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. So he had a Freudian slip.
He sure enough did.
So I see why you're passionate. Were you in that car?
No, I was home, but I heard the shots because it was not far from the house. And I went to the window and I saw a car stopping, but it was very dark. And I thought it was a car that had a blowout tire. So I went on to doing what I was doing. And so it wasn't until my sister came running in the house and said Daddy had been shot that I realized what had happened.
So they are out there practicing how they are going to kill Black people.
Wow.
Yep.
Unbelievable. God had his hand on you and your family. And I realized that story is enough to make me vote whether or not I ever heard of anything, I went through that, or if I ever experienced that. But that story alone are the stories that we need to tell of just how important it is as people, as Black people, of what we had to endure just to vote. So just sitting back and say, like you're not going to go to the store today, it's not going to work. Do you
a lot of people, in the schools, we've just taught people about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. But in almost every little Southern area, there was a Black person like my father who was spending time trying to get people's rights. And they didn't make the headlines. Of course, the Black newspapers covered it. Plug out for Astro. And I know the Pittsburgh Courier covered the shooting of my father. And Jet Magazine carried a whole 5-page spread on the shooting. But these are sort of unrecognized heroes that young people didn't grow up hearing about them. We have a memorial fund in my father's name. And recently I post the Jet article there. And one young person wrote and said, I never heard about this. I grew up in Lake Providence, Louisiana. I never heard of it. So we have to continue to tell the story of what our foreparents did in order to get us to where we are.
Absolutely. I'm glad you bring up that point, because we are streaming on the Afro-American newspapers Facebook page, which you said told the story of your father. So I need to go back and look at the archives and really find that story. I would be really interested to see
No, it
that.
wasn't in the Afro. I just said a member of the
Mike
NNPA.
Afro. Okay.
Yeah, it was carried in the Pittsburgh Courier.
Carried in the Pittsburgh Courier. So we still can probably pick that story up. But the Afro has been printing stories similar to this for over 128 years. And that's why people say, well, what about the black press? The black press is going to tell your story like no other. They're going to inform you. They're going to educate you. And hopefully, if you're watching now, the Chicken Box, you can share it with somebody. So this will be recorded. You can go back and watch it, even if they missed the beginning, because somebody needs to hear it who's on the fence of voting. So, man, hope you're enjoying your lunch, breakfast, or dinner. This is the Chicken Box. Black people versus the vote. We have to vote. Micha, man, what's going on with black people in terms of voting right now? What are you hearing out there on the street in DC?
Well, you know, as I've been covering things, particularly the protests, people for the most part are excited about voting. But I'm hearing a lot of younger people, particularly in my generation, the millennial generation, who some feel that truly voting in this election, as they felt in 2016, is voting for the lesser of two evils. We talked about that last week on Black People versus the Young Vote. And actually, we had Ben Jealous on Afro Live on Monday, who told us that it's, you really have to boil down what you think an evil is if you're thinking of voting for the lesser of two evils. But the most important thing that I've been telling people, or attempting to use my platform to do, is just saying to vote. While I totally have a bias in who I think that people should vote for this year, I really hope that people exercise their civic duties. You hear somebody like Dr. Scott's father, who was shot fighting for the vote, and we hear so many stories of martyrs who fought for our rights. And so just that alone is what I'm pushing people to say, because you have that right, go ahead and vote. But we saw in 2018 and in 2016 that Black people weren't voting in numbers like we've seen in the past. I believe it was 61.3%. Bless you.
Oh my God.
It better not be Black people versus the Rona.
Man, that's Black people versus an allergy season. Allergy season.
No, look,
that was so ignorant. That was ignorant and rude. I tried to I took my camera off and left my mic on. That was like, good thing I didn't say nothing. I didn't say nothing ignorant. That's funny. Anyway.
What's so funny is I muted earlier because my allergies are killing me. And I just need
Hold on. I'm not getting the Rona. I already painted the blood of Jesus on my door. It's passed me by.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry, everybody listening. But
yes, we all have a collective bless you for
right. That's better than a fart online. That was super embarrassing. Anyway.
We saw in the past two elections, 2016 and 2018, that the Black vote did go down. It went from about 63% to 61.3%, which, as Dr. Draper said last week, is a failing grade still. While it's more than half of us, when you got a 60 in school, you still failed the class. And so, I'm curious to hear from Dr. Scott, because we are voting. In fact, more than half of the African American community is voting. But how do we mobilize that other 40%?
Well, I tell people that one candidate last time asked, what do we have to lose? And we've had 4 years to look at what we have to lose. And that gives a certain group of people their answer as to why they should vote. And then Black women never seen a Black woman on the ticket before. And so a lot of people, that will motivate them, because it's somebody who looks like them and they know that their daughters sitting there watching TV. In fact, if you looked on Twitter the day that her nomination was announced, several people had their little girls with pictures how the little girl was walking up to the TV and pointing, and so, some people are looking for people who look like them. Other people are looking at how we are suffering in the pandemic. And if that's not enough to motivate you, look at the statistics of how many Black people have died. Even if you don't know anybody, but if you lived in Detroit or New York, you probably had several friends that died in this pandemic. So there are a lot of reasons, and when you see Social Security being taken away. So you may not be old enough for Social Security, but you got aunts and uncles and mothers and fathers who are living on Social Security, and many of them don't have pensions. That's their only income. And if somebody is talking about taking that money away and supporting more tax cuts for the rich, then that's another answer. So I think that there's enough out here to give everybody a reason to vote. I studied political science. I'm a political scientist. And they taught me politics is about who gets what, but who gets what, when, and how. And that was one thing that my father always talked about when he was trying to convince people that fighting for the right to vote was important enough to give up your life. He says that you go to the communities where people have the right to vote. You look at their neighborhoods, you look at the benefits they get, and look at our communities where we don't have the right to vote. Now, people are saying we don't get it. Well, part of the reason why we don't get what we need is that after we vote, then we don't make demands on our elected officials. And so there is, our tax dollars going to be taken anyway. So your taxes are being taken. You are supporting these people. You're paying their income, and you're going to sit back and just allow them to get elected and you not have any input. I want to know where my tax dollars are going. And so therefore I'm going to vote, and then I'm going to keep up with what's happening after the person's elected. Send a letter or attend a hearing or something to show that I like that or I don't like that. I may, if I have a little money, I may support a candidate financially. So when I call their office, they look and say, oh, she gave a contribution. We better listen to her. So I think these are the things we need to be teaching people. We don't teach civics anymore. So we have to be out here in the community teaching people why they should vote and what are the benefits, as well as the benefits of voting, but as well as what do you lose when you don't vote.
Wow. What do you lose when you don't vote? Man, accountability, just beyond just going to the poll. You said hold them to the fire, Dr. Scott. You said make them accountable because they make a bunch of promises as they're running on what they feel about is wrong and how they are going to help make it better, how they're going to unify. But if you don't go, like you said, and hold them accountable, if you don't show up to the meeting, some people who have parents they never been to, they don't even go up to the school. You don't talk to the teacher. You're not involved in the PTA. You don't know what's going on. You're so busy. And you don't now in the pandemic that they're home with you. Now you got to figure out what's going on because you now have become a home educator. So now you have to spend some time. But I hear you, Dr. Scott, saying don't be so selfish. Get involved in the community that you live in. And we have to, we're talking about the presidential election, but we're really talking about all elections, especially because it all trickles down. It was the same thing we talked about last week with the census. You kind of ignored it and then wonder why the money doesn't go where it goes. But anyway, this is the Chicken Box. We're wrapping up on time. We all the way live today on the Afro. We have a bunch of great lives coming up with Micha Green. But I want you, Felicia, Angela, thank you, Shaniqua, Chippy Bass hanging out, Mark P, of course, Wayne Moore. Let's see who else is still hanging out with us. We thank you for tuning in. Bonnie Deans, Mike Green is still hanging in. That's dad. See, that's what I'm talking about. He was at the PTA meeting. I see Mike. I believe it. Now, a lot of fathers definitely don't go to PTA because they think there's a bunch of women that's going to be there, and they don't want to deal with whatever the politics of the PTA is. They don't want to deal with it. But fathers, get involved. Those fathers who are involved, stay involved.
No, my dad was a stage dad, a dance dad, a theater dad, and was at all of this stuff. Basketball dad, even though I wasn't a good basketball player, he still.
But he was a good dad through the whole time. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. There's another topic. Every time we talk, it's black people versus good dad. But it's a great dad. Anyway, we got 30 seconds to get up on the box about anything that you want to go. Micha, you want to go first?
I do, but before we go, and I know we're wrapping fairly early because of me, but I gotta get the Afro fact in this week. Only because I really, really liked it. So I'll make it quick. And then
no. I'm not gonna rush you. We can't rush the facts because if see, Dr. Scott, you were meant to be. We had another guest planned for this, and you came in at the last second, but you were the right person for the moment. And that's how God does something. Sometimes you're trying to do something, and what you're doing is not as against what he wants to do. So again, thank you just for the moment of sharing with us today. So Micha, give us an Afro fact, because I like Dr. Scott's facts. They were great.
They were amazing. So this is not at all about the Black vote, but this week's Afro fact is inspired by September 17th, 1983, when the first Black woman was crowned Miss America. Drop it in the comments if you know who she is. Now, you may know her as actress and singer. Who is it? Who is it, guys?
Come on, drop it in quick. It's on the tip of your tongue.
All right, I'm going to just say it now. I know you're already typing. Vanessa Williams. In 1983, Williams was crowned Miss America 1984, the first African-American to earn the title. She was originally crowned Miss New York, then took the title all the way. But during this time, she was criticized about her race from white people. And then some Black people said she was not Black enough because she had light eyes and skin. Then 2 months before the end of her reign in 1984, Williams learned that nude photos would be leaked of her in Penthouse magazine without her consent, and so she was forced to resign in 72 hours. Now, the new photos had been part of an internship after her freshman year with an artist that was supposed to just be using the photos as silhouettes. And she had no idea that they would even go anywhere. She did it with another model who was interning with her. However, she was still forced to resign, but she slayed her career still, because we still know who she is all these years later. And in 2015, when Williams judged the Miss American pageant, the head of the organization issued a public apology. And that's this week's Afro Fact.
Boom. Wow. We always say today now on social media, you never know what's going to come back. So the decisions you make sometimes affect your destiny, but they don't always have to determine where you go. Because just because you made a bad decision, you can turn around and make a good decision. So now you can get on the box.
All right. So I'll make it quick because I got on the box about this last week. But Black people, just vote. You know, I think it's so important to exercise that right that we were given, and not that we were given, but that we fought for. It's so incredibly important. And, you know, I've spent my whole life with rights that my parents were not afforded. And of course, my grandparents and great grandparents were not afforded. And so I take that very, very seriously. But right now, our rights are at stake, and I'm feeling it. I'm feeling like some of my rights are being taken away. And so it's so important to vote because we don't want to lose the progress that we've had. In fact, we want to keep that momentum going and ensure that there's equity for all of us. I'm off the box.
She's off the box. If you're in the comments and you're in the box right now, we're gonna let Dr. Scott go last. Listen, the vote is so important. I'm gonna get on the box right now. People have died, bled, sweat, pandemic, no pandemic, sickness, whooping cough, whatever happened, they made it to the polls because it was that important to their family. It was that important to our history. It's that important to us as Black people. Is everything going to be all right? No. Is who's the president going to make you get up in the morning and pursue your dreams? I doubt it, right? But it's some things that are going to affect us and that are going to help us and that are going to be different if we get out there and vote. So if you think your vote doesn't count, that's a lot of times why people don't vote. Your vote does count. We got to get that number past 60% people. We need to get it at 99.999 if we can get it there. So I'm going to keep saying it for the next 50 or how many days we have. You have to vote. Go and take a senior in your family who you haven't called during the pandemic to say hello and check in on, and go to the polls, and you'll be able to skip the line. Anyway, Dr. Scott.
Okay, well, what I'll close with is that this year we are not talking about voting day. We are talking about voting season. Many states have already started their early voting. So what you need to do is to first make certain that you are registered to vote. And even if you thought you were registered to vote, go online and make certain that you are still registered to vote, because in many states they have purged the rolls and they have taken people off the rolls because they haven't voted since 4 years ago or whatever. And so also make certain that your voting district, if you're going to vote on election day, make certain that your voting district is where you thought it was going to be, because you'll drive across town and you'll find that there are only 4 voting booths of voting opportunities open to you this time, because the church where you voted last time is not open now because of the pandemic. So there are a lot of things. And then you might want to decide to vote early. And we are recommending that people vote early, because you never know. If you wait till election day, you never know what might be happening that day. Your car may not start. It may be a snowstorm or a windstorm or a firestorm, with all the things that are happening around climate change. So vote early. If you are afraid to go and be around people, order an absentee ballot. Most states don't just automatically send you one. Some states do, DC does, but your state may not automatically send it. So order your absentee ballot. If you want to vote in person, find out what are the dates for early voting and make certain that you plan that, and take somebody with you. Check with your relatives, check with senior citizens. If they need to get absentee ballots, help them. So it's like, now you can't just go and vote. You need to have a plan. And then the other thing, you need to know what's on the ballot. It's not just the president. There are a lot of other opportunities. There are a lot of, in several states, you have Black candidates running for Senate who are offering some alternatives. So study the ballot online. I hate to get into the voting booth and there are some initiatives and somebody standing there trying to read 15 initiatives in the voting booth. Read that stuff before you go there. Know what's on the ballot and be ready to vote.
Dr. Scott, thank you very much. Where do you go to read those initiatives? Did you give a website where people can check their check and make sure they're still registered to vote?
Well, yeah, one of the best sites is probably vote.org. And they will, you can go there and you can click and find out what's happening in your state. Or if locally, you can just go to the Board of Elections, Virginia, Board of Elections, Maryland, DC, and there will be all the information you need there. You have a local NAACP, usually they have it on their website. A lot of churches even putting it on their website. So ignorance is not an excuse this time, because there are so many organizations that are mobilized, and you're getting calls. I know I get calls every day about voting. And so it's no excuse to say, oh, I forgot. It's all over the news. Everybody's talking about it. LeBron James is putting money into paying for people to go and work as poll watchers. So if you need some money, go and decide to work that day, especially if you're young and in good health. They're going to give you the protective device, protective gear to wear for the day. So, you can help to make money, plus you can be there to observe and learn the back end of voting. So it's no excuse now. There are so many opportunities and so many ways to vote and so much information out here. So I say no excuses, just go and vote. Like they say, just do it.
Just do it. I'm Kevin Impeccable Peck, your Gen Xer, along with Micha Green, my millennial friend, and Dr. Scott, who is representing the boomers in Miss Draper's absence. And we kind of glad that we would have been ganged up by boomers today. You see that? We would have been double teamed by the boomers today. I'm going to leave with this. You said ignorance is not an excuse. Not at this time or not at any time. We will see you next week, Thursday, on the Chicken Box. I don't even know the topic yet. because a better one might come. What is it?
I can't be sure because we're waiting for what I'll tell the people is we are waiting for a congressional member to see if he or she can join us. But if not, I believe it's Black people versus the mattress.
Black people versus the mattress. Okay. Hey,
but I will say there were some people who had some questions in the comments that we didn't get to. So just based off of time, I'm going to send those questions to Dr. Scott so she can answer them. So one is, I'm going to say it just so you know and you're ready, was from Shaniqua. And she says, what is your perspective on COVID-19 talk with regard to presidential candidates as it relates to vaccine release plans? So we'll give you Dr. Scott's answer and throw it in the comments, as well as Felicia still wants to know which book you recommended in the beginning. So
white nationalism, Black interest.
Black nationalism, Black interest.
White nationalism, Black interest.
Yes. That's not
by Ron Walters.
Yes. Okay. Perfect.
White nationalism, Black interest.
White nationalism, Black interest. So we're gonna put that down there for you, Felicia, as well. But thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here.